Pues buenas tardes, María, Agnes, queridos todos. I'm really happy to host this activity today. I'm gonna be really quick. Let me just steal 2 minutes to say thank you to Andrés. It's great to have you here. Like in a joke, like in a typical Spanish joke to Spaniards in London cab, ¿qué hacemos los dos aquí hablando en inglés si somos los dos de Burgos? I want to thank Antonio as well, because he's a very good friend, a very patient friend, and so far not so well known like Andrés, but he's also a very good writer, and I really trust in your novel, que lo sepas. I want to thank Laura. She's more than arts officer. She's, let me say, arts commander at the Cervantes Institute. She's the spirit of our goal, ¿no? Es realmente la que nos mueve. Y finally, even though maybe she will be a bit late, I want to thank Renata Sperandio, who is a very close person to us and who inspired this activity. I want to tell you in public, Renata, ci mancherai troppo. We will miss you a lot. It's very sad you are leaving from Dublin, but we trust you will be back soon. And to all of you, thank you for being here today with us. Thank you for keeping reading, keep dreaming with us, and keep taking care. Hay que cuidarse y yo me voy a callar. Gracias a los tres, gracias a todos. Enjoy. Antonio, tú eres el jefe.
Yeah, I think, well, thank you for your kind words, Victor, as always. Everyone can say who is the nice friend here when you are just trusting so much my writing. I think before I start saying anything else, I reckon it would be nice if Andrés proceeds reading the beginning of his novel, the one we are going to talk about today. It is going to be the whole conversation is going to be very bizarre, as Victor said, because Andrés and myself, we are both Spanish and we're going to be talking in English, and that might be a little bit weird, but we're going to, it's going to be fine. So let's start reading his novel in Spanish, so we have a colorful beginning of this session. Thank you very much, Andrés, for being here.
Well, thank you, Antonio. Thank you, Victor, for the invitation, and Laura for coordinating all this program. I'm going to read, as Antonio has said, just the beginning of the book is the first page, first paragraph, just to make you hear how it sounds. And it goes, cuando me preguntan por los 32 niños que perdieron la vida en San Cristóbal, mi respuesta varía según la edad de mi interlocutor. Si tiene la mía, respondo que comprender no es más que recomponer lo que solo hemos visto fragmentariamente. Si es más joven, le pregunto si cree o no en los malos presagios. Casi siempre me contestan que no, como si creer en ellos supusiera tenerle poco aprecio a la libertad. Yo no hago más preguntas y les cuento entonces mi versión de los hechos, porque es lo único que tengo, y porque sería inútil convencerlos de que no se trata tanto de que aprecien la libertad, como de que no crean tan ingenuamente en la justicia. Si yo fuese un poco más enérgico o un poco menos cobarde, comenzaría mi historia siempre con la misma frase. Casi todo el mundo tiene lo que se merece, y los malos presagios existen. Vaya que sí existen. That's the beginning of the book.
Thanks for that. Well, just to let people know that they can type their questions and inquiries and needs in general through our chat, so we can just pass it to Andrés, so we can make this a little bit more dynamic, and then we really squeeze as many as we can in the hour, less than an hour we have. so we can just get all the information we want from Andrés. So I'm going to start myself and asking you, I reckon it's, just to start from the beginning, I would like to ask you if you remember when was the moment that it clicked for you, the story, and you thought, okay, I'm going to write about this, and what is behind this story?
Well, I think there's two different things. One was that I saw a documentary film called The Children of Leningradsky. I had to look for the name in English because I didn't. The Children of Leningradsky is a Polish documentary film. It was an Oscar winning that year. It's like 1990 something. And the directors were Andrei Zelensky and Hannah Pollack. I think you can easily find it. It's a documentary film on a child community that lives in the subway of the city of Leningradsky. Child community, I mean by like kids of like between 5 and 10 years old living together in a community. And it was a fascinating documentary film. Those kids were kids, but at the same time junkies and bums, and they were attacking people, but they were kids, they were like very violent kids, but kids at the very end of the story. So what appealed me the most watching that documentary film, it was how was the link with the community, with the adult community of this child community, how this adult community of Leningradsky, in order to destroy this child community, start to rename things. And it made me think in a way of the pre-Nazi Germany, how when you need to do something that is wrong and you know is wrong, you start changing the names of the things, of everything, in order to allow to yourself to do the things that otherwise you would never do. So that thing that the Leningradsky community do to this community of a child community is starting considering them not just kids but something else. And that was very interesting to me because it was for the first time I wanted to write a political fiction. For the most part of my literary career, I've been writing psychological fiction most of the time, like family novels, things like that. But for the first time, I wanted to write like a political fiction, especially focused on the idea on how truth is made by a community after a traumatic event happened. How we as a community create a truth. That was the most interesting thing for me to do, because at the same time, it was in Spain, we started to have all these problems with the Ley de Memoria Histórica. You probably know about it. Is the law that the socialist government created to reestablish some truths and some events in the Civil War collective memory of our recent history of the dictator and everything. So this notion of to get to a truth, to get a truth, and to establish a truth in a community situation, especially when a traumatic event has happened, it has to do in a way to hear the most of the voices possible, and how this interaction, even contradictory interaction of voices, of different voices, is the only possibility to create a consensus of what happened here. So that was the other side of the story. One was this possibility of doing a child collective character, and in the other hand, it was this need that I had at that time of write a political fiction on how truth is made.
Going to the child aspect, you have already written about childhood in different of your books, and probably very remarkable one was as well the angle that you used to do that was such a small hands. I think that was the name the translation in English, yeah, small hands. And I'm curious about your way of talking about childhood, because somehow it's always disconnected from the father mother figure. It's sort of like there are always children who are on their own in somehow, you know, even in August, September, the moment that teenager is sort of like facing his time, is always like despising their parents and doing it on his own. So I just like if you could if there is something that is just happening in my head, or if it's something that really you are looking for it intentionally.
Well, there is with childhood, there is always something interesting about how we related to with not only with kids, but with the very notion of what childhood is, you know, and and the reality that has been changing for the last 2 centuries. We have changed the whole notion of what childhood is. The notion we have now on childhood was born in the French Enlightenment, and it has to do in a way with with the the paradise lost of when with the official death of God, so to speak. That when God officially dies in the Western civilization, we need to shift. We need to shift the paradise from heaven to earth. We need to have the security. We need to have the certainty that we have been already in paradise, and we transfer this paradise from heaven to earth to the place of childhood. That is the moment in which Western civilization decided that paradise keeps existing and is in childhood. And that is the moment in which you can trace it very clearly in literature. It is the moment in which literature starts to watch the childhood age with with a melancholic point of view. We started to miss ourselves as kids, and we started to see kids as semi-gods, semi-human, semi-gods creatures that have no duties, but have all the power of the freedom that they have and everything, so to speak. So at the same time that this happened, that the paradise is transferred to the childhood age, is the beginning of the institution, the educational institution. So it's very interesting how in the same time of history, we create an institution to make kids adults as soon as possible and make them grow as soon as possible. And at the same time, we're envy of these very kids that we're trying to make adults as soon as possible. So this bipolar side of what a child is so fascinating. We, on one hand, are envy of kids, but on the other hand, we are scared of kids. We are scared of kids when kids are alone. That's why we're trying to institutionalize them as soon as possible. And yeah, and I think this bipolar feeling, reactions that we have with kids are very established in our fictional way to have this in our fictional way to think about childhood that we all have now, like thinking on childhood like a absolutely happy age, when the reality is childhood is as sad or happy as any other age in life, with different characteristics, but at the same time is as happy or sad. But it's so interesting how we erase any trace of sadness in childhood, or try to erase any trace of sadness in childhood, in order to keep this fictional notion of childhood we have as a collectivity, you know. So this situation of a fiction that we all agree about, and at the same time that is so far from the real thing of a child, of what a child is what make possible for a community like the Leningradsky community to make two types childhood: the childhood that we agree with and the childhood who are not with us. And you can see it in in the first world countries how in a very subtle way we try to think think of kids in this two type balance of the kids that are inclined to be like civilians or and the kids were not like ours, you know. And that differentiation of these two types of kids in a way, in a very subtle way, allow us to do to these other kids, things that we never would do to ours, you know. That is the scary thing. And that is I think the narrative atmosphere that I'm interested in is, for instance, there's a movie I like a lot by Haneke. It's called in Spanish La Cinta Blanca. I don't know how is the title in English. It's about a bunch of violent kids in the pre-Nazi Germany. And it's so interesting because Haneke has this theory of when something really violent is just about to happen in a place, you can feel it in the air. There's something that is in the air, that is in the energy among us that make us able to do something that any other time we would have ever considered to do, you know? And that was the other thing that I wanted to do in this novel. What is need in a society, in a small society, to do something terrible? What is needed to be in the air, in the energy of that town, of that place, of that territory, to allow these people to do something terrible? Why do people go mad, like in a collective way? That is very interesting to me because it's something that is also happening now. You can see it clearly in this country, in America. You can feel it in a way. You see these reactions like the Capitol a few months ago that can happen. What is going on? What is needed in the air for us to do this type of thing? And it is not only something that has to do with our difficulties or chances as individuals, but with something that as a collectivity we are not allowed anymore to think or to feel or to agree with, you know. So that type of collective energy, that was at the very beginning, at the very core of the book for me. I wanted to make a collective character in this novel,
which is somehow is as well connected with these non-accompanied children minors, no, that we are seeing, well, in the US where you are now, but also in Europe, and you are yourself from Madrid, so you are Spanish, and you know as well that we have a big issue politically speaking, the different opinions about the MENA, so-called. Just before moving to some of the questions that people are starting to warm up slowly, but they are there. Going to the aspect about the social critical, the social critical that you were mentioning, is that why you decided to use a chronicle as a way of narrating the story, just using this structure?
Well, yeah, when you're trying to make fiction in which the main key of the plot is to show how a truth is made, which is the chronicle. Chronicle is the established format for history, for writing history. It is interesting to make the perspective of a long period of time that happened between the events and the narration and the description of the events, that allows you to not only to allow the many number of voices possible to be in, but also to make the feelings more subtle about and the reactions and the sensation about those events more subtle, to make the reason to be the reason more reasonable in a way, you know. So that is why in this particular chronicle the narrator is talking about the events 20 years later than they happened officially. So I wanted to describe with very different voices, because in this novel there is the narrator, of course, talking about the events, but they have also fragments of journalism, of academic writing. There are also, I don't know, there's some like journals from teenagers in town. All these different type of text, all these different textures make you think, some of them written at the very moment that the events happen and some of them written later, makes you have a good idea of how our perception on the events, especially traumatic events, change like every moment that is going farther, you know. And how these interactions are never predictable. You never know what is going to happen when you add another element to this composition, you know. So that is actually kind of what feminism is claiming to do, is claiming to add as many voices as possible, female voices as possible, to see just what happened, you know. It's not equality in this novel is made by the past of the time in a way, but also because of the inclusion of so many elements that at that very moment were impossible to hear. One of the key elements of this novel is a diary, is a journal that a teenager writes. Well, let's talk a little bit about the plot, because otherwise it's going to be ununderstandable. There is a bunch of kids that arrive to a small town in South America, in some place in South America, and they speak an ununderstandable language. Nobody understands what type of language is it. So nobody could understand those kids, but there is a teenager in town that all of a sudden realizes that these kids are using a very common structure to make the things they tell to each other ununderstandable for adults. And in a way, she's like the Rosetta Stone of this new language that the kids have created. At that moment when the events are happening, nobody understands the kids. But 20 years later, we could decipher some of the things that those kids were saying. For my understanding, it was very important that those kids were seen from our perspective in a very ambiguous way, not being able to say if this was a utopia, new utopia, or a dystopia, you know. So I was at that moment very interested in utopian socialism and anarchism. And for me, it was very interesting to think, how would it be an anarchist utopia made by a child community? That was very appealing as a narrative construction that you can, I mean, it was like a perfect game. There was a lot of elements you can use. One of them, it was, of course, the language. It was impossible for those kids not to create a new language. A new language is needed when a new world is coming. It always happens like that. When you fall in love with someone, you need to rename everything. No, in a way, when you change the country, you have to rename things. When you change your perspective, your political ideas. You have to rename things. If there is something that we have understand after this pandemic, is there was a lot of words that we've been using for a long time that they're useless anymore. They're useless now. They're not using. They're not working anymore. I was translating a few months ago Rebecca West novel. What was the name of the novel? The Fountain Overflows, and this is at the very end of the First World War. And one of the things she says there is the names they had for suffering and pain and death, they were not working anymore after a war. And we have the same feeling now, that the words we have for isolation, for solitude, for all these feelings we've been feeling all this last year, they're not working anymore. That is what happened to these kids in this community.
I find interesting that you define a chaotic or an anarchy by children, and you define it a republic. I don't know if that would be. I don't know. Anyway, Julia was asking about your favorite Spanish writers, and we could even go a little farther and your influence, yeah, more influential writers in your writing.
Sure. Well, it is very interesting how in the last like 4 years, there's been a huge explosion of female writers. You can tell it is because this feminist wave that is international, and this is probably the most appealing revolution that we have now in hands. But the thing is, the most appealing writers lately have been, for me, female writers. And I would say I've been very, very shocked by a novel written by a girl called Katisha Aguirre. She's a Basque Country writer, wonderful writer. She has a novel called Las Madres No. I'm also very impressed by Aisha de la Cruz, another wonderful writer. But there are like a lot of them. And for this particular novel, I would say it's been a huge influence, Javier Cerca's writing, in a way, because I think he's one of the best political fictional writers we have. And he has always very creative and interesting ways to approach what is a political situation, how we think politically in terms of cultural identity. And I think for me it was a very big influence for this particular novel.
Oya is asking, has the child figure in Thomas Mann's Death in Venice influenced your work in any way, perhaps in so far as he has certain power over the adult?
Well, that type of book, I mean, I don't think that book has been a huge influence for me, even though I love Thomas Mann's writing. But if you think on Death in Venice, what was the name of the kid, by the way? I don't remember.
I don't remember that.
It's very famous. I don't remember.
Dazio, no?
¿Cómo?
Dazio?
Dazio. So in that case, the kid is not a kid. It is an excuse. It's a reflection of the adult's mind who is watching his own death coming. I don't think that particular kid is a real kid. For me, it was more an influence, for instance, Peter Pan. Peter Pan is an anarchist community. I mean, if you think of Peter, for me, the most appealing books for kids are anarchist books. Alice in Wonderworld is an anarchist, another anarchist book. But especially Peter Pan. Peter Pan is fantastic. It's an anarchist community. It is in a parallel world for adults. Those kids have like an independent way of watching, an independent moral, a parallel nature, if you will. And that was more interesting. On the other hand, you would have the most awful book in the world for me is The Little Prince. I think it's the book I hate the most. Probably now is people hating me here, but I'm going to create a online community of people who hate The Little Prince. The Little Prince is a book made by an adult for adults to watch childhood in a melancholic way. It's not a book for kids for the very reason that a kid is not melancholic about anything. A kid can be sad, but not melancholic. Melancholia is a feeling that only an adult can have. And this way of watching childhood as a melancholic age is a very adult thing to do. That is exactly the last type of thing that would be in the other side of my influence. That is exact. I wanted to do exactly the opposite to The Little Prince. I also write books for kids, and I'm always very aware that the feel that you have to connect with all the feelings that a kid have. Isolate also the bad feelings, isolation, sadness. Not being loved, not being attended, all these things are in the cosmic world of every kid, and you have to talk about these things. Not talking about these things is not being faithful to the world of the kids, the world they have, the real world they have. So this notion that the adult have to be always protecting the kid is a very fake thing in a way, because for instance, most of the kids, they're able to think of death in a more natural way than an adult have. An adult is more scared about death than a child, because it's more conscious in a way. The relation that all the kids have with death, for instance, my boy, who is a small boy now, but he's always collecting dead animals, dead insects, and so he has two collections of insects, dead insects and alive insects, and both of them are very important to him. The same, they have the same importance, because he's looking for different things in all these two collections, no? But in a way, I have the feeling that his relation with death is more natural than mine, in a way, you know. So the feeling that we need to protect kids from all these feelings is on us, not on them.
And your book has been compared to The Lord of the Flies, but it's a book that I've heard you before. You don't like it either.
No, I don't like it either. I think.
Okay, we have here a pattern, Andrés.
Well, it's not. I think it's the most classical book on child community that we have. Like it's a book we all agree is a classic, but for me, it's more like a moralist parable than a realistic book. It works more like a fable or something like that, and it's a very Protestant way of putting it, in a way that, for instance, it would have been done by a Hollywood movie. You know, Lord of the Flies is the perfect Hollywood movie. It is made for make us be scared of freedom. Actually, it is. We are scared of. It is a clear example of how William Golding was scared of kids and child mind, because he wanted to be. He make a clear distinction between the reasonable kids and the unreasonable kids. And the unreasonable kids were like the violent ones. And this, I mean, he has a black and white thing in his, in the way he puts the child's mind. And for me, it's all mixed up. For me, violence is a part of the game, that is a part of love, that is a part of fantasy, that, I mean, in the child's mind, I mean. And is all is the interesting thing is everything mixed up in the child's mind. It's not clear where it ends, the violence and the love. And the thing that they're confused, naming things, is so interesting for me. For instance, a kid is always confused about using good and beautiful, for instance. The notion of ethics and the notion of aesthetics are mixed up in a child's mind. They call ugly things that are wrong or bad, for instance. That is a huge difference between them and us, for example. You know, for us, it's very clear what is the limit between ugly and bad. But for a kid, it's not. And that undistinction of ethic and aesthetic, it is a totally different, huge world in the mind. I mean, it is an absolutely different way of behavior. It's an absolutely way of thinking what is transcendental, or what is love, or what is all the main crucial key concepts we use to create a new society. So from my point of view as a writer, you're trying to create how would a child community would work. You have to erase in your mind all these key elements that you use to create an adult community, and try to work with an undistinction of these ethics and aesthetics, for instance, or violence and love, or what if this community that is creating a new way of being in the world, in a way, they create a new way of loving, a new way of kissing, a new way of relating. One of the things that I was more interested in is how this child community erase the notion of hierarchy. Hierarchy as the key element to order a society, and how an absolutely equal society would work if it could happen. That was very appealing from fiction, you know. And I was very interested in just playing with all these elements, trying to create how a child community would be.
No, I see that you enjoyed. Mariel Moore says, thank you for your time this evening. I wonder if the children had been given a voice in the book, would have broken the spell, and the adults wouldn't have been able to project their fears on them. It seems that children often don't have a voice.
Well, that's a beautiful question. One of the things that I wanted to do also, it was, I'm going to take this out, sorry. It was very appealing to me, the idea of creating all this child community on the mere speculation of what happened. That was very, because those kids appear at the beginning of the novel and then they disappear absolutely. You can see things happening that they do, but the kids are not present anymore. There is another fiction that I like a lot, is the flute player of Hamelin. You know that story? Mm-hmm. That is, for me, was one of the most beautiful story for kids ever written. You can tell from that kids, we are scared of kids because kids may decide to abandon us. That is one of the most beautiful discoveries of that story. The adult mind is scared of being abandoned by the kid, not the other way around, but that way, you know. And this is what one of the things that happened in the story is those kids disappear, and this community of San Cristobal is forced to think about this community without this community being present. So it's kind of a gap, it's a hole. There's something that is missing, but it's creating an energy in the center of the book. And it is like when someone dies, you're forced to the speculation. When someone dies and there's something that you don't know about that person, you're obliged to the speculation. You have time to speculate all the time about that hole, and that hole may create an energy. It's like a black hole. It becomes a black hole, and it can swallow energy, or create new energies around. That is what happened with this child community. They just disappear, and they start calling the other kids in town. So the other kids start to go with them. And that is the moment this community freaks out about this child community. And they just try to destroy them in a clear way.
And it's connected.
So, but the idea of writing a novel about something that is not present, it was also very interesting.
I was saying that is something that you said before about one thing is what the other children do, another thing is what our children do, which is when things start getting complicated, let's say, and in a way, after the death of the children, it's not any spoiler, it's just in the first page, saying after the death of the children, you also try to say that the relationship between the children and the adults is a little bit broken, no? Because even the narrator lose the contact with the daughter.
Yeah. Well, let's go. Let's go first to the first part of your question. It's about childhoodness. If that thing exists, I don't know. I don't even know if that word means something in English. But childhoodness, it is kind of a condition that all our kids have, and not these other kids. That is what happened. Like, sorry for naming all the time pre-Nazi Germany, but it is a way. It was a reference for me. For instance, when the German community want to kill all this Jewish community in Germany, it all started by the way of saying, well, all these Jews, they're human like us, but not so human. They're a little bit less human than us, or a little bit different. Let's say different. And all these things start there, when you try to make a distinction of the condition, and you say the condition is more clear in this individual than in this other individual. Childhoodness, in order to this community to being able to do the terrible thing they want to do, that is erase from the face of earth this child community, they need to say childhoodness is more in our kids than it is those other kids, who are here. But this novel is also, as you say, it's a novel on what is to have a kid. I mean, from the adult's perception, it is what is on our side. What is to be a father? What is to be a mother? How is our relation, especially with sons and daughters-in-law? So, what is to be? What is based our condition of parents? On hierarchy, on institution, on wisdom, on loving, on where is it? And that is very interesting also, because all what happened with this child community is spread of in any other elements in the construction of the community of San Cristobal.
And it's now that you mentioned San Cristobal, and also attending to the question of Mark, he said, why did you choose South America as the place where the novel happens? And also he's interested in knowing how long did you take in writing the book?
Well, San Cristobal is not San Cristobal de las Casas. Someone asked me once about that. I mean, I try to find a name, could be like a generic name for a small town. And I was more thinking in the north of Argentina or Brazil or in a very like subtropical landscape. But yeah, it could have been there a lot of places in Asia, for instance, but I need to put like Spanish names, so that's why it's Latin America. But in a way, I was trying to make a fable as Joseph Conrad's short stories. So I was trying to make as less as not very specific the 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 place. It was not important for me. It was important for me to make a realistic fiction, but not to say, well, that happened in Mexico or Argentina. And it took almost like 8-9 months, but this is the third time that I tried to write this novel. I tried and failed 2 times more before, with different types of fiction, more urban. At the beginning, it was settled in Madrid, and it was not working with Romanian kids. That happened actually. One of the original ideas of the book, there was a Romanian child community in my neighborhood in Madrid who started attacking the old people in my neighborhood. And it was very interesting at that time because it was kind of a war between old age and childs. It was crazy, but it was very, very. I mean, you can see it like from your balcony. It was so interesting, and it was funny because all these kids were taken by the police, but because there were kids, they were again in the streets like 10 minutes later, doing the same thing all over again. And those like old people in my neighborhood start to make a community and attack the kids, attacking the kids. And it was really crazy. It was really crazy. It was almost, I mean, funny in a way, but it was terrible because they were like hurting people. And at the beginning, I didn't get the tone of the book. That is a problem that used to happen to me. I just don't get the tone. It's the most difficult thing to do for me to find the tone in which a story needs to be written.
I hope Maria also gets answer with this, where the story, the inspiration, and what you just answer at the beginning of the conversation. Now you're talking about the tone and what is difficult when building a novel. I was thinking you started, I don't know how to put this in or how it's said in the, I don't know, put in the radar of writers, of everyone, with Katya's sister. And then 15 years later, you got the Herralde Award with this novel. Not just to put a frame in the time, how do you think in all these years that you have been writing, your style has been evolving? We're going to.
Well, it's funny you make this question because yesterday I was talking with my translator, Lisa Dilman. It was a meeting a bit like this. And I was telling her, I'm also a translator from English and Italian. And I was telling her that I translated this book by Henry James. It was an anthology of all his stories based in New York, settled in New York. And it is interesting because his first short story was set in New York and based in New York, and the last one also. And you can see how Henry James' style was changing through his life, from very short sentences without very sharp and short sentences to these incredibly long 3-4 pages long sentences that he had at the end. And you can feel also in what moment he started to dictate his own writing rather than writing it himself. And when was the death of his sister that changed his style completely. So I think, but I don't think Henry James himself was very able to say his style had changed a lot. He probably thought his style was pretty much the same. And I have the same feeling. I have the feeling that I've been writing pretty much the same way all my life, but my translator was saying, well, no, you're not, you're definitely not. Your style is so different now, and you've been changing a lot. And I think one of the things that have changed is that I'm more, and I think I'm now more a political writer than before, less narcissistic, if you will, less interested in myself as the nature of writing. You know, I'm not so interested in my feelings about reality, and more interested in how we do things as a community. You know, and I think that has changed. That had changed, like, my approach completely, and also my style.
Can we say as a headline that you are becoming the first non-narcissistic writer in the world?
Well, I hope.
There are still a few minutes, and I would like to, as someone, because I'm very interested in that as well. Someone is talking about the tone, and is connected to the other question of Maria Kelly asking about the third time that you needed to finish. So I would like to make a question about that, and just someone said if the tone is important, like in poetry, but also how you define that tone that you needed to catch to actually click with the novel, with the story.
Well, that's a tricky question. There's no way for you to know what is the tone that you need to use, rather than using tones and failing, like a try and fail politic, you know, because it took me like a long time for me to find out that the tone that I need for this particular book, it was as neutral as possible. If you want to do like a political fiction that is believable, you need to use a tone as neutral as possible. But at the same time, if you use an absolutely neutral tone for the book, it doesn't work neither. So the thing that it was more difficult for me to find out in this book, particularly in this fiction, it was that the feelings of the narrator needed to be in the book, like need to be part of the fiction. At the beginning, it was just this narrator who was a third person narrator talking as a chronicle and about what happened in the city. But I understood at the very end of the book that there was something missing in the book. It was the particular feelings of this person as part of the community. The book was not working because it was not believable that this person was not involved in all the events that he was talking about. So this balance between the individual and the collective character, that was the hardest thing to find for me in this book. But every book has its own trick, you know, and it is never easy how to find the tone, especially when you have written like several books and you have like all these tricks of professional writer, and you have like the temptation of becoming a professional writer, so to speak. That is the worst temptation that a writer can have, because it's like the temptation of becoming a zombie in a way, like a dead writer, you know. You have to put yourself in a position that you need to find a new way of learning how to tell a story. It's a bit of a cliche what I'm saying, but it's the naked truth.
Good. And with the truth and the time, I'm afraid that we're gonna close this Fantastic conversation with you, Andrés. Thank you very much for, again, giving us the opportunity of talking not just about the book, but about childhood, truth, death, literature. And even you gave us a few names that we have to read, to have a look at some authors. That is always good. And thank you to the Institute Cervantes and to the European Club that is giving us this chance to have moments like this. So thank you to everyone, of course, for being here and standing for an hour, being part of it, and the questions were all great. So thank you for that as well. You take care, and see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you, Antonio, and thank you, everything.
Andrés.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you.